The difference between art and graffiti. Elliot Sneezy. There are those who like graffiti because it looks like art based on color scheme, style, and meaning. Graffiti is writings or drawings illicitly etched or painted on walls in public places. I was one of those who became fascinated by what I thought was art. However, I truly never understood graffiti until I started looking at it, how it ended up on walls. There are people who believe graffiti is a form of art, but because of laws, miscommunication, and low property value, graffiti is nothing more than vandalism that destroys communities. The difference between art and graffiti is permission. In art galleries, the art is usually placed on a canvas purchased most likely by the artist. The gallery gives the artist permission to display or sell his or her work. As for graffiti, the Arizona Revised Statute 13-1602A5, criminal damage, mentions permission and a culpable mental state of being reckless when damaging someone else's property. Nowadays, when I see graffiti, the first thought that comes to mind is, did the person have permission to write on that property? If they didn't, then it's criminal. If they did, then it's not criminal. No one is supposed to come on your property and write whatever they want, causing damage, unless you give them permission to do so. I can appreciate a nice piece of artwork, but when it comes to graffiti, I can only cringe because I know it's most likely criminal. There are two types of graffiti: gang graffiti and tagger graffiti. In this slide, we're going to be looking at gang graffiti. The signs and words tell more about the gang. When looking at gang graffiti, there's little to no style. You also have roll call information, which is usually names of all the gang members. Locations are more for territory and threats. When looking at gang graffiti, it's all about the gang. Gang graffiti is geared towards other gangs or for intimidation. In this slide, you can see the signs and words tell more about the gang. There's really no style when it comes to the graffiti that's put on the walls here. If you look to the far right picture where it says Creeper, Sleepy, and Smiley, that's roll call information that's specific to the gang members involved. Now if you look to the far left, it'll say L Sleepy, which is part of the same gang. And again, going all the way down to the bottom photograph, you will see where it says WSP F the Creek. And again, I'm just leaving the cuss words out, but obviously they're speaking to another gang. The paint in the green says Creekside 187 WSP Killer, which is basically making a threat. 187 is the penal code for homicide in California. Again, these gangs are talking to each other. Now let's take a look at tagger graffiti. The signs and words tell more about the writer. When looking at tagger graffiti, you will see that it's more artistic than gang graffiti. Looking at locations, it's basically more for attention and praise. The more attention and the more praise they get, the better they seem to operate. Tagging graffiti is mainly for taggers or tagging crews. Graffiti is geared towards the people involved in this culture. Looking at this particular tagger graffiti, you can see that there is no gang affiliation in this whatsoever. What it reads up on top is, "To school, you bitch-ass toys." Then it's part of the alphabet, and I'm just going to read where it says JKLMNOPQRSTUVWXYZ. Then at the very bottom, it says solo. Solo meaning one. Again, like I said, it's only the writer, which is only and usually one person. In this particular tagging graffiti, you will see that this is a little more artistic than all the other types of graffiti that we had looked at so far. Looking at where this was placed at, it was placed under a bridge where people commonly drive by, and again shows the attention and praise that someone is looking for. People that do this type of graffiti are usually out to praise themselves. In this particular graffiti, it shows the writer's name, which is Risk, and he's basically telling everyone that he has taken a risk. Graffiti is commonly miscommunicated. Looking at history, people have tried deciphering petroglyphs, and to this day we can only assume the meanings of petroglyphs without knowing the writers. Because most graffitis are done illegally without permission, the writer is usually not known, which gives the reader the ability to assume what has been written. On the night of August 1st, 2003, an unknown person spray painted the letters KKK and Satan on property of the Hare Krishna temple in Chandler, Arizona. One of the members said, "We feel it was an act of hate, and it's scary. We don't know the intentions of those who scrawled the graffiti." The police department that took the report responded, stating, "It's just a bunch of graffiti on church. There's nothing that indicates it's a hate crime. Everything was just so arbitrary from initials to men's genitalia." This is a prime example of how graffiti can be interpreted wrong. Looking at what the members stated, KKK would most likely stand for the Ku Klux Klan, which is a hate group. However, since the graffiti words were not specifically written out and there were other words or drawings, the police felt the letters could have been the writer's initials. Without the writer actually identifying what was written, the meaning could differ from one reader to another. Looking at this particular slide, I asked the question, what is the meaning? Without actually knowing who the writer is, we don't really know too much about this. As you can see, there's some green spray paint and also some blue spray paint as well, which indicates there are two different writers that are writing on this wall. One is more of a white supremacist who's writing swastikas, KKK, FTW, and 311. KKK would most likely stand for the Ku Klux Klan, FTW would stand for F the world, and 311 is the 11th letter, which is the letter K in the alphabet 3 times, which goes back to KKK. In the green, that is most likely Tagger graffiti. The effects of graffiti are far more damaging than what most people see. Those who don't know what graffiti reads will tend to avoid places where graffiti is written. Mel Melendez wrote an article for the Arizona Republic about a woman who was trying to make Phoenix graffiti free. Pauline Tafoya, who has lived in the South Mountain Village for 22 years, was quoted saying, "We need programs like this because graffiti really diminishes communities. And then before you know it, you have a blighted area because businesses and residents leave. When people such as businesses and residents leave, then the economy will leave just the same." According to Phoenix city officials, the spray-painted vandalism cost business owners and residents $4 million to $6 million annually. I'm sure just half the money spent on graffiti costs could be used in better areas to help others, but because of the cost, damage done to walls reach far more than just the property. Looking at this particular slide, you will see how much graffiti affects an area where people will avoid places like this. Although this may be a nice area, people will tend to avoid this just by the looks alone, which will affect most communities. The effects of graffiti. Graffiti is a form of expression. I'm all for freedom of speech, just not at the cost of others. Graffiti doesn't physically hurt anyone, but causing one to fear is a form of hurt emotions resulting into a negative economy catastrophe. One can make the argument that graffiti beautifies communities and attracts tourists, but depending on what is written will depend on who is being attracted to the area. Gangs and drug dealers like graffiti too. In conclusion, graffiti is not art, because without permission, laws are being broken, causing it to be criminal. Communication is arbitrary, which most often causes fear, and depending on what is written, will lower property value, causing people to avoid the area. Therefore, graffiti is nothing more than vandalism that destroys communities. The difference between art and graffiti is permission. Obviously, looking at this particular photo, this was done with permission, so this is art.